Thank you for joining us on We Love San Diego. Our host, Ryan McFadden, is one of the most in-demand evangelists today. As an actor who shared the screen with the likes of Robin Williams and Don Johnson, and later became part of the MTV Comedy Tour, Ryan had his life mapped out in front of him. But through the power of the gospel, God radically changed his life and perspective to go on from being served to serving. Today, Ryan and his wife Rose run one of the premier Christian outreach organizations in the country called We Love San Diego, as they bring church to the people, bringing hope to the hopeless, and serving those that society often turns a blind eye towards. Join us today as Ryan shares a message of hope that we believe will impact your life and inspire you to live the life that God is calling you to live. Now, here's your host of We Love San Diego, Ryan McFadden.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today on We Love San Diego. I pray that today's show blesses your life and that God reveals a truth to you that only He can. Well, my guest today is someone that's really, really special to me. In fact, he's someone that I guess in essence I grew up with. We went to high school together. He was someone that he hung out with my brother quite a bit as well. In fact, I vividly remember where he would stand during, say, lunchtime at high school. We called it the quad. And my brother and his crew, they would hang out in front. So he would basically just be standing behind where we were at. And I vividly remember that, even though it's been several years. I won't say how many. It's been more than a few. But I still remember that like it's so vivid in my brain. And that's why I'm so excited just to bring him on today. He really does have a history with me in our hometown, but I'm not bringing him on because of that. I'm bringing him on because he has such a unique, amazing story. I can tell you a little bit about him now. Matthew Stice, who's our guest, he is a pastor at We Are Church. He's the men's ministry director of New Life Dream Center in Bethel Island, California. He's married to his amazing wife, Angelica. He has 3 boys. And when you hear that, you say, boy, that's a dream for so many people. Like, that is a cookie cutter pastor. He's married, 3 kids, all boys. Like, man, this is amazing. But why I have him on the show is because it wasn't always that way. Oh, he had such an amazing, amazing transformation. In fact, he was featured on the TLC TV show called Cracking Addiction, as Matt's life was spinning completely out of control, and until he had that radical transformation that brought him to the place he is today. And without any further ado, I want to welcome Matthew Stice to our show, We Love San Diego here. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for having me. It is a huge blessing to come on this show and just share with everybody what God's done in my life. It's kind of mind-blowing for me still thinking about, Him coming and changing me the way He has and getting a hold of my heart. It's just a huge blessing, especially from where my selfish outlook took me to where I am now. So thank you for this opportunity to share a little bit of my testimony.
Yeah, we would love to hear that. And, again, I'm someone, I remember you really from my freshman year of high school. So this is going back a while. And again, I know who you were back then, and there was a lot of your story that I wasn't aware of until I actually watched the TV show. But just seeing this transformation that could not be more real is just amazing to me. So I'm excited because I know that there's going to be people that are listening to this show that are in the place now that you used to be. And I want them to hear your testimony and just really inspire them, give them hope that there is still hope for them, that there is still a chance to get out of where they're at and get to where they really want to be. So I'm going to stay out of your way. Would you be willing to share your testimony? And then when you're done, I'll ask you a few questions, and I'll stay out of your way for the rest of the testimony here.
Yes, I would love to. This is a testimony of God's saving power that can happen in a person's life. And, I want to start with Revelations 12:11. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by their testimony. And they did not love their life so much that they were afraid to die. And I love that last part. The first part's quoted, I think, more than the last part. And I want to remember not to go back to loving my life so much that I forget about what God's done for me. I want Luke 9:23 to be at the forefront of my life when it says, then he said to them, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow after me.
Yeah.
So it's just a great opportunity. I'll start from the beginning. I was born on June 16th, 1976 in San Leandro, California, the Bay Area, Northern California. When I was 2 years old, I moved to Pittsburgh, California, the town we're both from. And I lived there my whole life. I ended up going to high school there, and it's so cool. It's a cool city. You can get in a lot of trouble here, don't get me wrong, but it's a melting pot, you know. There's so many different races, and looking back now, it sure has taught me a lot of life lessons and, priceless things that I'm just so thankful that God chose for me to grow up in Pittsburgh. And I didn't always feel that way, of course, but I feel that way now. I live in a blue-collar, middle-class home right here in 1226 Stevens Drive, Pittsburgh. Two loving parents, a hardworking dad, a nurturing mom, the classic middle child. I have an older brother named Daniel, a younger sister named Julie, a very healthy and protected childhood. You know, it's interesting to point that out because not everybody who falls into addiction comes from a broken home and has just crazy things happen to them as childhood. Like, I had nothing happen to me crazy. I was just a very blessed childhood, and I want to make that point because it's not always the opposite, you know. I did find sports at a young age, and what I start to notice is just looking back how selfish and self-centered I am by nature. You know, the Bible breaks that down, and playing sports and competing, and it really built up my ego and my pride. But at the same time, I can remember being super self-conscious. Fear, I noticed in my life in different forms, you know, just consuming fear, so concerned about what people thought of me. But the thing about it is I didn't realize back then that my spirit was sick. And that's such an important point, that because I was living a self-centered life with a self-centered outlook and doing what pleased Matt became the center of the universe, and living that way will make a person's spirit sick.
Yeah.
So that's just something that I didn't even realize back then. And so, you know, a huge turning point in my life was after going to a smaller Christian school. So I raised in a Christian home from kindergarten to 8th grade, you know, relatively sheltered, and then went this huge culture shock. I ended up going to a public school for the first time in my life, and Pittsburgh High School. And so talk about fear and self-conscious, already dealing with those things that because of that, I mean, it just went through the roof at this point. And a lot of people wouldn't even notice that about me. As I talk to my friends, I tell them how much fear I had, and they were just so blown away because I was very outspoken and very loud and tried so hard to fit in and be cool. But this fear was very consuming. And then right around 10th grade, what I found to fix that fear and that being self-conscious and those things was the first time I drank a beer, a 40-ounce beer. I'm from the 90s, so that was popular back then. A 40-ounce beer gave me this ease and comfort, a counterfeit feeling of treating that sick spirit that I had and this peace that I was like, I felt whole inside. I was like, oh my gosh. And quickly, in a matter of a couple months, that turned into a daily thing. I was chasing that feeling every single day within a couple months. And I just don't think that's normal. I know a lot of people struggle with addiction themselves, but a lot of people don't. So it's just one of those things that grabbed a hold of me so fast. So we're talking about 16 years old in 10th grade. And then around that time, of course, my mom was bringing us to church my whole life, but we started to go to church in Concord called Full Gospel. And I met a guy there named Chip G who showed and modeled for me what a man of God was. I didn't have a relationship with Jesus at all. I just went to the youth group, played basketball, had a really good experience in that sense. He knew I was smoking weed. He would talk to me about smoking weed. And it's just such a pivotal point in my life because one night at a youth camp that I went to with that church, I got caught smoking weed. And this guy, Chip, he had a decision to make. Is he going to send me home and call my mom, or is he going to let me stay? Well, he let me stay, and that night in worship, he comes to me crying and says, Matt, God has a plan for your life, a plan for your life. And he spoke that over my life, and I never forgot that. And so, unfortunately, a couple more decades went by before those seeds actually took root and planted in my life. So as time went on, my disease progressed. I know it to be a disease now, a threefold disease. I'm sick in my mind, my body, and my spirit. And I'll go into more of that later. But it progressed from alcohol and weed to coke and ecstasy. Right around 2021, the bar scene was so fun. Walnut Creek, San Ramon, San Francisco turned into the club scene. So a lot of fun during those years, a lot of wild living and fun. And eventually, though, it all caught up to me in a bigger way when I was prescribed Vicodin for the first time. So I kid you not, I had a sore throat. I went in to see the doctor, and they prescribed me Vicodin for sore throat. And that feeling that I got from Vicodin outweighed the feeling I got from alcohol, from weed, from coke, from anything else. And that feeling of that opiate really grabbed a hold of me. And for the next 15 years of my life, it really ran the show. I mean, I tried everything. I tried to move to Chico, to Vegas, to Tennessee. I tried to change girlfriends. I tried to change jobs. I tried to go get loans to get new cars. I had my first son, Kenny, about that time. And just nothing was fulfilling me. And the feelings I would get from the drugs and alcohol, they weren't quite fulfilling like they once were. They weren't working as well as they did. And that's the thing. It's a double cross. This addiction's a double cross. And coming to this place in my life, I'm in my late 20s, turning 30, and I'm in this place of just complete hopelessness. I had tried to change. I had tried different things, but I had met my match. I was a slave to these drugs and alcohol, and I couldn't see a way out. So I was just getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And before I knew it, I wound up 36 years old, homeless. I moved on from Vicodin to OC to shooting heroin and shooting meth. And I found myself in Richmond, California, in the most dirtiest, gutterest, in flop houses, putting myself in danger and just destroying everything good in my life. I had my future wife, Angelica, with me at the time. We had met years prior, and she was out there with me. We were shooting dope. I mean, we just got so bad. We found out she was pregnant. We couldn't stop using. Family members pleaded with us. We had opportunities here and there, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And leading up to June 13th, 2012, God's grace was on my life that day. My sister called me out of the blue and said I could come see my son Kenny at my mom's house, which was weird because I wasn't allowed over at my mom's. I had burned that bridge. I wasn't allowed to see my son Kenny. That's how pitiful and bad things had gotten for me. But they called me that day to come over and see Kenny. And as I walked into my mom's house right here, the house I'm in right now doing this interview, I sat on her couch, and the next thing I noticed, it was me and Angelica, my wife, who's my wife now. We got bombarded by video cameras and people we don't know. They just rushed in the room with these cameras in our face, and we're like, what is going on? What the heck is this? And come to find out that was the camera crew of the TLC group for the show that we were on. And, of course, it caught us off guard. But through that process, we were offered to go to these top-notch treatment facilities. So just because we were on that show, by God's grace, her mom contacted Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil's son was booting this show on TLC, and they really wanted Angelica because it was a good story. Nursing school dropout, 22 years old, pregnant, shooting dope, come from a good family. And so they picked up the show, and it wasn't, they didn't want me to be a part of it at all. They said, that's the older drug dealer boyfriend. Let's get him away. He's no good for her. But because we wouldn't come back to her family's house in Chino Hills, they had to call my parents and do the show up here in Pittsburgh, California, and threw me in on the show at the last minute.
Wow.
Yeah. At the last minute, God's grace, I was there. It was going to be get him out of the picture, and whatever was going to happen to me was going to happen to me. And that's the loving, compassionate God that we serve. And that word that was spoken over me in youth camp came to be 20 years later. It came to be. And so praise the Lord.
That's, it's so fun. It's so funny you say that. Sorry, I don't mean to cut off your testimony, because that was one of the things when I was watching that episode on the TV show, and I don't mean this in a rude sense, and please don't take it the wrong way, but when I was watching it, that was kind of the vibe I got, that, everyone's like, okay, we need to get this girl away from this guy who's ruining her life. And she decides first, I'm going to go to rehab. But the impression that I had, and maybe it was just me, but I don't think it was just me, is that they're going to ask you, and there's not a chance. There's no way that you're going to actually agree to do this, and she's going to leave. She's going to leave you. She's going to go get clean, and then you were going to be stuck as is. And when they ask you that question, like, are you willing to go? Assuming that the answer is obviously going to be no. You actually shock the world, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to go. So, I mean, like, taking us back to that moment in time, like, what's going on in your head at that moment? Like, are you in this mental battle of, I don't know if I'm going to go, I don't know if I want to go, or are you like, all right, this is an answer to my prayer that I actually have an open door to change my life, and I need to change my life? Like, take us back to that moment. Like, what is going through your head as you have cameras and the TV show is being filmed literally live on that spot?
Yeah, it wasn't much of a mental battle at that point, which is so interesting, because if whoever gets a chance to watch the show, you'll see when they first barge in and we catch us off guard, we're shocked. I initially try to walk off.
Yeah.
And I try to tell my girlfriend at the time, my future wife, pregnant with my son, let's get out of here. Stand up. Let's go. So we had wanted help for the last year really solid, and we had no idea how to get help. It just was out of our mental capacity to know that there was a way. And then this happens, this opportunity happens, and initially, even wanting help, I stand up just in human nature and say, let's get out of here, and almost self-destruct that opportunity that God gave us. And I'm just so aware of that now, because I work with people, and try to help them get sober. And I watch that same mentality time and time again. And I'm just like blown away, like God's grace on my life. And someone got in front of us. My sister stopped me, and the guy that did the show, Brandon, stopped my wife, Angelica, and said, just come back and listen, just listen. So it's just astounding that although we wanted help, there was something in us that tried to self-sabotage.
Yeah. But I see that so often. I think that there's so many times where God has that encounter with us, and we have an opportunity to go right or left. And we can go God's path, but there is that pull. That is such a strong pull that we can also, because we have free will, because we're not made as robots, that it's not like automatically God says, all right, here's your opportunity, and we just automatically start to walk that path. That there is that opportunity that you can choose the wrong thing. And that's going, it's seen that. That's why I love your reaction when they come in, because, and I encourage, check out this show. You can watch it on YouTube now. It's, again, Matthew Stice. If you just put that into YouTube, and you'll see his story. The show was Cracking Addiction on TLC. Your reaction is so genuine and so real. Like, I don't want to be here. I need to get out of here. And I, exactly like you said, like, let's just get out of here. And you think about this. What if in that moment of time, Angelica's like, yeah, let's go. And you guys get in that car and you're never, like, you're gone. Like, who knows what that story looks like,
It's just so crazy to think, I had my little drug sack already planned and hooked up. My plan was to come visit my family, eat, see my son, selfish as ever, of course, go get that sack that I had hooked up. So we already had like a plan set in place, which, doesn't compare to what God was offering, of course, but when you're in that mindset, you just aren't thinking clearly. And that's what I get a chance to share with others, because what I didn't know at the time was this was going on too. Ephesians 6:12, for we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in the dark world. So my selfish outlook and actions opened the door, which I didn't even realize, to the gravity of the devil coming in my life, and opened myself up to evil spirits and things, addiction and all these things. And 2 Corinthians 2:11, it says, so that Satan will not outsmart us, for we are familiar with his evil schemes. See, I wasn't familiar with his evil schemes back then, and I almost got outsmarted because of my pride and defensiveness. Hey, come on, we're out of here. Let's get out of here.
Yeah.
So I don't have the words to explain that, except ignorant and a bunch of other stuff, but it's just very alarming.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always the counterfeit. There's always that other opportunity to go against what God wants you to do. And I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it time and time again. And it's amazing to me that you, when everyone expects you to say no, you said yes. When everyone thinks, okay, this guy is not going to do it, he's just going to go back to his life, it's like, no, I'm ready to do it. And that was what just grabbed me, because it was just so amazing to see that, and just to see that you shocked the world with that answer of something that no one's expecting. And we only have a few minutes left here, and I'm going to bring you back next week. I want the audience to know Matt's story is so impactful that we have to make 2 shows out of this. So I'm going to bring you back next week. I probably should ask that first. Are you able to come back next week with us? But I'd love to bring you back and ask a lot more questions. But really, the question that is on my mind, and something you just touched on, is when you're in the middle of this. I've never experienced it, so I'm talking without knowledge, having gone through it. When you're in that dark time, when you're in that moment of addiction, like, are you thinking clearly enough to say, I know I need to change this, I know I need to get out of this, but you just kind of seem like every single day you fall back into that trap? Or is it just a feeling like you have no control over your body, almost like your body is leading you to do things whether you want to do them or not? Like, what is that moment like? Like, what does it feel like?
It's exactly like that. There's a point where I may have had more control and more willpower, but I lost that. I went too far deep into the spiritual realm of darkness that I lost control. And I didn't even have a choice. And I didn't know none of this until I went to the program at Origins in South Padre Island, Texas, the place that the show sent me, and I learned this. I learned that I had a threefold disease. That's what addiction is. I'm sick in my mind, my body, and my spirit. And so I don't have a choice whether to use or not after a certain point, and then I don't have control over it at all. So it reminds me of Matthew 12:29, right, where it says, it takes a stronger man than Satan, who had me as his possession after a certain point, to come in and pull Satan's possession, which was me, out from his grasp and set me back on solid ground. So then now God gives me back control through his spirit, the self-control that comes from God, because I lost that.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people that have literally lost the power to choose whether they're going to use or not, which I had a hard time wrapping my mind around that when I first heard that. And I had no control, for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, you're in a moment where it's like your body is just leading you, whether you want to go that path or not. You just don't have the control, and that's, I think, something that's unique, because I think a lot of people that don't suffer with addictions just look at someone that does and say, "Why don't you just stop?" Like, there's a pastor, Steve Smotherman, who has a mega church over in New Mexico. And I remember us talking with him. We were playing golf, and he made that comment to me, just stop. But you've shown that it's harder to do that. So, Matt, I'm going to bring you back next week. Like I said, your story's great, and I want more people to hear it. So come back next week with us, and we're going to finish up this story with Matt. But thank you so much for being with us here today, and we'll tie this up next week.
Thank you for joining us for We Love San Diego with Ryan McFadden. We pray that this message has blessed your life. If you'd like to learn more about We Love San Diego or to partner with us, visit welovesandiego.org, spelled WELUV sandiego.org. That's WELUV sandiego.org. For additional messages, find us on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts at We Love San Diego. Also, if you live in the San Diego area, you can find out where and when the next outreach event is by following We Love San Diego on Facebook and Instagram. We so value you listening to our show today and hope you tune in next Sunday at 9 a.m. as we bring another message of hope to you and your family. And as Ryan always says, find a need and fill it. Find a hurt and heal it. This has been We Love San Diego.
There's jewelry, and then there's jewelry by Isabella Rose Design Company. Isabella Rose Design Company makes handmade jewelry for a cause. All their sales go towards fighting human trafficking. Using polymer clay and precious metals, their modern jewelry designs have helped them become one of the fastest growing jewelry companies in the world. Feel good and look good knowing that you're making a difference in the area of human trafficking. Visit them today at isabellarosedesign.co. That's isabellarosedesign.co.
When the COVID-19 pandemic struck, We Love San Diego sprung into action, giving out over 30,000 pounds of food and supplies, as well as over 50,000 diapers to those in need. Today, the outreach continues as they give out over 60,000 pounds of food and supplies to over 10,000 families who otherwise wouldn't know where their next meal was coming from. Visit WeLoveSanDiego.org to help out and become the hands and feet of Jesus. That's WeLoveSanDiego.org.
Thank you for joining us on We Love San Diego. Our host, Ryan McFadden, is one of the most in-demand evangelists today. As an actor who shared the screen with the likes of Robin Williams and Don Johnson, and later became part of the MTV Comedy Tour, Ryan had his life mapped out in front of him. But through the power of the gospel, God radically changed his life and perspective to go on from being served to serving. Today, Ryan and his wife Rose run one of the premier Christian outreach organizations in the country called We Love San Diego, as they bring church to the people, bringing hope to the hopeless, and serving those that society often turns a blind eye towards. Join us today as Ryan shares a message of hope that we believe will impact your life and inspire you to live the life that God is calling you to live. Now, here's your host of We Love San Diego, Ryan McFadden.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today on We Love San Diego. I'm Ryan McFadden. I pray that today's show blesses your life and that God reveals a truth to you that only He can. Well, we're continuing our conversation this week with Matt Stice. And if you did not hear last week's show, I encourage you to go onto our podcast, listen to that show, listen to his amazing testimony that he shared as going from someone that was addicted to drugs and alcohol to becoming a pastor and the men's ministry director today at the New Life Dream Center in Bethel Island, California. It's an amazing story of transformation. I'll tell you what, if Matt can do it, you can do it. It'll give hope to anyone out there listening to this today that feels hopeless. I encourage you to listen back to that show. But there's so many questions that I still had, and I asked Matt to join us today because there's so many questions that I want to dive into from his perspective, from his experience of what he had. So that's why I've asked him to come back. He's been so gracious to do that. He is cooking right now in Phoenix, Arizona. I mean that literally. It's, as you know, very, very hot there, and he is on vacation there. So without any further ado, I want to welcome Matt Stice back to our show here. We Love San Diego. Matt, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I'm so glad I could come back and finish this story for you all.
Yeah,
opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. No, I'm so thankful that you came back. Are you alive? You're doing okay in the 100 and who knows how hot, 100 plus degree weather that you're experiencing right now in Arizona?
I am. I'm indoors mostly in houses and cars with AC blasting, so I'm doing okay.
So here's the thing that we learned about being in Arizona that was crazy. Like, no joke, you'll have 118, 119 degree days. So like you said, you do not go outside because it's so hot. You don't go outside. We had a pool. You don't even think about going into the pool because it's just so hot. You don't even want to feel that heat out there. So you would start to do your errands around like 9:30 at night. It's like, all right, we're going to run to Target. And I kid you not, at 9:30 at night, it's still like 111 degrees. And you're like, oh my gosh, how does anyone live here? It is so hot. So I hope you're surviving okay and the air conditioner does not go out. We pray that in Jesus' name here. So, but welcome back to the show. And as I said, last week you shared an important fact that I thought was so important for people to understand. You started to talk about how when you're in the middle of addiction, whether it's drugs, alcohol, both, whatever the case is, that mentally you may want to stop, but really like you almost seemingly have no control over your body, that it's so addicted to that substance that even though you want to do it, you want to stop, you really feel like you're trapped and you can't. I think it was so important for you to share that as you did last week, because I think there's so many people out there that have loved ones that are addicted to drugs, alcohol, again, or both, that are just thinking in their mind, I wonder why they don't just stop. Like everyone tells them it's not good for them, just stop. And you shared last week that it's really a lack of control that you feel like you have in those moments. And you were on the TLC show, Cracking Addiction, and they asked you, hey, would you be willing to go to rehab? And I think you shocked everyone on that show by actually saying that you would be willing to do that. And that's really where we left off in the testimony last week. So what I wanted to start out with today and dive into in short is, what happens when you say, yes, I'm going to rehab, and you actually go? Like, what is that life? Because I'm assuming it is going to be a 180-degree difference from what you were experiencing. Like, what happens once you get into rehab?
Yeah, so leading up to that, right after the show aired, was recorded, they brought us back into the room at my mother's house, and they said, well, you're going to be going on an airplane flight, a red-eye flight from Oakland all the way to Texas. And part of this thing, this addiction thing, is the withdrawals. So I was able to shoot up for the last time because withdrawals is there's so much fear around withdrawing for the addict that can stop them from wanting to take the necessary steps of getting help. So what I did was, when I did shoot up for the last time, which was my very last time, I actually got this thing called cotton fever, which when you shoot up, the cotton, little small particles, can get into your bloodstream. So along with that and the red-eye flight to Oakland, all of a sudden, before I know it, I'm in Texas. So this is June 14th, 2012. I ended up in Texas. Don't even remember the first 2 or 3 days, because 2 days later, on June 16th, it was my birthday. I vaguely remember a cake being presented to me. I know I didn't even have a bite of it. Like, I was that out of it. Like, I didn't sleep for a whole week. You can't get comfortable when you're withdrawing, and it's just the just most horrendous thing ever. And I know that there's so much fear for the addict around withdrawing. And so once I'm finally there, it took about 2 weeks being there. They even shared a story with me that I didn't know. When I first came to some of the circle settings of the rehab, I was sitting opposite of the circle, facing a wall, scaring people there. Like, they told me this later, like, you actually scared us. Like, you were so out of it that they were like, who's this guy, you know?
Wow.
And it took about 2 weeks before it dawned on me the opportunity that I had been given. I started thinking, dude, I just got on a TV show. Like, I don't understand. Like, how did that happen? I'm in Texas, in this beautiful island. And about a month in, I can remember I was on fire for God, for change, for recovery. It was in Texas that I had this revelation that God, for some reason, He desires me. And he even at my worst, He orchestrated the events in my life to save me and to reveal Himself to me. And that was just such a mind-blowing thing. And that happened about a month into my stay there. It's just amazing.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And
what?
Going into that 1 month there, how long are you going through the withdrawal period?
The first week is just horrendous, and then there's another week of withdrawals, and then the third week of like mental withdrawals. It's bad. It takes a long time to get out of your system, and I tell you, that's one of the biggest fears of an addict getting help. I know it was mine, and I hear it all the time. Yeah, it's something.
Wow. So you're 1 month in, you have this encounter with God, and then what? Like what is taking place after that?
Okay, here's what I was shown when I was at Legends. It was explained to me that the root of my sickness, this alcoholism and drug addiction that I had, it was really from being disconnected from God. And because of that, I was only able to see things from my human point of view. So my whole focus on life, who God is, who I am, it was distorted, right? Like Colossians 3:2 says, to set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. So all I had to go off was my human point of view to live life on. You know, I'm plagued with selfish and self-centeredness, full of fear, and of course that made my spirit sick. And they're breaking this stuff down to me while I'm there. They told me, since I had a spiritual sickness, I must have a spiritual remedy. Only God, who is spirit, can treat a sick spirit. You know,
Wow.
But in order to see God as my solution, I had to first accept that I was a wretch in and of myself. There was a hollow place in my soul that only God was meant to fill. And it breaks it down in Romans 7:24-25. It said, "O wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death? Thanks be to God who delivers me through Jesus Christ our Lord." And this was breaks down to me while I was there, you know, that I had this hollow place in my soul that only God can fill. There's no other option. You know, if I want to recover, there's only one way that I'm going to recover. And for the first time in my life, this stuff was presented to me. And I finally had a different way of treating my sick spirit. Rather than turning to drugs and alcohol, I could turn to God and let him treat my sick spirit.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. No, it reminds me of the verse, "For man it's impossible, with God nothing's impossible." And we face things at times in life that we really can't figure a way out of. We can't see a way out of. And the reality is there may not be that mental way out of a situation, but all things are possible with God. And when you turn to him, he actually opens up a door, maybe where one's never existed before, so that you can get out of the situation that you're in, that you're never in a pit so deep that God can't just lift his hands down and bring you right out of that. And you're proof of that.
Exactly. It's like I had to accept this fact in Colossians 1:16 that all things have been created through him and for him. I was created by God for God. Yeah. And I had to stop living this life of rebellion and fighting against God's will and trying to play God myself and living in self-will. You know, this is what I had to come to this conclusion. I had to be ready for that, you know, because the world wants to offer all these superficial treatments for people's mortal wounds. You know, in Jeremiah 6:14, it talks about that. And the world has all these, you know, ways of thinking they can treat this thing, addiction, and you know, you're going to always relapse and all these different things. Take this pill and that pill. And the only true way to treat the spiritual thirst is to drink of God's Spirit, right? Spend time in his word daily. Because what the drugs and alcohol did, they temporarily treated that deep yearning and spiritual thirst that all humans have for God. And this stuff was like broken down to me, you know, like it says in Psalm 42:1, "As a deer longs for the streams of water, so my soul longs for you, God."
Wow.
And until I shifted towards God was going to be my answer and my solution to addiction, and then once that happened, everything changed for me.
That's amazing. I mean, because there's a void that we all have that only God can fill. And so many people chase after things. And I know Deion Sanders was someone that spoke about this quite well, where he said, I had everything. He's like, you know, you name it, I had it. If you can think of it, I had it. And he still talks about that void that was in his heart that you could never fill, because the only thing that can fill it is a relationship with God. And you're trying, you know, you're chasing after alcohol, you're chasing after drugs, because there is that void that we all have. And you don't know that it can't be filled through drugs or can't be filled through alcohol. In fact, that just leads you further and further away. But then you have this encounter that completely changes your life. And here's my question for you. So when you're in rehab, are they doing Bible studies? Are they like, how is this being presented to you? And because of what you're going through, and you're going through the withdrawals, and that's why I think it's funny that they're telling you what you didn't even realize, that for the first, you know, while you weren't even facing the circle, you're facing the complete opposite way. So you're not sitting there just saying, yeah, I'm completely receptive to this. So like, what in the world happened where all of a sudden what they're telling you, because I would think that there's a hardness of heart when they're telling you this, that you're still like, yeah, I don't know about that. Like, what happened that broke your heart, that broke through, and you said, wow, like, this is the answer. This is it.
Yeah, I know exactly what it was. It was the cycle of addiction right out of the doctor's opinion in the AA Big Book. And they took this on a page and they put it on a whiteboard, and they showed me how I was sick in my mind, body, and spirit, and that void that I had can only be filled by God. And I saw my life in there where I kept trying to lick this thing without God's help, and I would emerge remorseful, make firm resolution, make all the promises in the world, and I would just keep breaking promise after promise after promise because I didn't know that I had to treat my mind, body, and spirit. And once, 3 weeks, I sat through this class, and man, somewhere in that period, about 2 weeks in, it just dawned on me. It's like, oh my gosh, like that's my problem. And then from there, I picked up the Bible again, and verses like Jeremiah 29:11 started jumping off the page, and other verses. Yeah. So they were big on the Big Book, and it really opened my eyes, especially when I found out that the Oxford movement, which is a Bible-based movement, is actually what birthed AA. So once I knew that the Bible was behind the Big Book, then I could really put my trust and faith into the Big Book because my mom had brought me up in church, and I knew that Jesus was God, you know?
Yeah.
So that's what happened. It's right out of the doctor's opinion.
And how long were you there? How long were you in the rehab?
I was in the actual rehab for 3 months. Then I did a month of transitional living, and then another 4 months of sober living. So I was actually on the island for a good 8 to 9 months.
Wow.
And yeah, I needed it, you know? I really needed it. Yeah, come to find out that I'm sick in these 3 parts, and I just need to treat these 3 parts until the day I die. 1 Thessalonians 5:23 even backs it up. It says, now may the God of peace himself sanctify you completely, and may your whole spirit, mind, and body be preserved blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. So the things I'm being taught are backed up in the Bible. And if I can continue on this path and stay in these simple 3 parts, I was given 100% guarantee not to ever relapse. Yeah. And I couldn't wrap my mind around it. I had to ask. I said, what do you mean 100%? Sure enough, the guy didn't budge at all and said, if you stay in these 3 parts and do these 3 simple things, you cannot relapse. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
You know, it's a bold statement.
How critical do you think it was? Because obviously you're in Northern California. They're sending you to Texas. There are places that are local in Northern California you could have gone to. How critical do you think it was to just get out of your environment, to actually like leave that completely, go to a place you've never been before? How critical do you feel like that was to helping facilitate this change?
I think it was very critical. You know, once I first got out there, I was trying to downplay my time there and talk them into letting me go home, you know, early, 2 months into it. It's just bizarre, you know. So more of that just crazy self-sabotaging thinking. But once I was there and I just realized what God moved mountains for me, you know, he put me on the show, put me in Texas. I was on this island, South Padre Island. It's like beautiful sand, beautiful ocean. We spent a lot of time down there on the water, and it was just so good for me, you know. I was so far away from home. It's like, I got to make this work, you know. I'm miles away from home, and so I think it was a big factor. Yeah.
And what are your friends and family thinking? Because here's what I'm picturing. So you probably have, you know, your old crew, the crew that used to go out drinking with or doing drugs with, you know, and they probably have thoughts on who you are now. And maybe they're looking at it like, oh, well, this is just a phase. He'll get out of it eventually. I'm sure you have friends and family that are standing up applauding you, saying, man, like God has done a miracle in your life. Like, what are your friends and family thinking at this point, just with the whole transformation, 180-degree turn that you've had?
Yeah, that's a very important because they're blown away at this point. But early on, it's interesting. Some were quickly on board, and others, they took some time. They wanted to see. They want proof. They want time. I have made many, many promises that turned into broken promises over the years. And I want to tell anybody who's out there who's getting sober and starting to walk with God, you need to give people time. You know, certain people will come quicker than others, and they have every right to be leery. You know, you got to know this. They need time to see. You need to prove to them that it isn't one of the broken promises that you've said so many times before. Yeah. You know, and so at this point, as the years go by, God restores all the relationships. Not one relationship is not restored. I just have to say that just time will prove if you just keep seeking God and you stay in these three simple parts and you don't get out, people will start to come on board.
That's great. It's funny you say that because we have a really close friend who is our outreach director in Arizona, Tim McGuire, and Tim's been on the show before. And gosh, I think he shared that he had been arrested like over 30 times. It might even be more than that. And he led a very similar life as you, but God completely transformed him, transformed his life, his heart. And the crazy thing is like, we're very protective, me and my wife, of our daughter. She just turned 3 years old, and they're like, we're not in that situation where we're just, anyone who wants to, hang around us is fine. Like, we're just always concerned. It's our only child, and we're probably very much overprotective. And Tim, with the life that he had before encountering God, would be the last person that you would ever feel like, okay, this guy's safe to be around us and be around our daughter. And he's one of the most trustworthy people. Like, him and his wife are some of our closest friends. And we completely have full trust because you've seen it time and time again, the evidence that God is in him and that God is in you. And I think it's funny you say that because I'm sure at first everyone's like, oh, well, we'll see. We'll see how long this sticks, because they're used to being disappointed or let down or whatever, terminology you want to use. But over time, you're able to prove it and show it and not be discouraged by that. Because I think so many people could be discouraged by it where they're just like, well, man, I've changed, but no one's giving me a chance, or no one's really standing up and believing this. But you're like, no, they're gonna react that way. You just got to stick with it and be that changed person. And over time, the confidence is going to grow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
No. So transitioning to what you're doing now. So tell the audience, like, what is it that you're now doing in terms of, the men's ministry director for New Life, and like, what are you ultimately doing?
Yeah, well, because of God's grace and power in my life, He's enabled me to be a husband now, a father of 3 boys.
Wow.
And a son again. Like, I'm actually a son to my parents again, honor thy mother and father. I'm so thankful for that.
Yeah.
I'm a brother. I'm a friend now, all these things. For the last 8 years, I've been the director of the New Life Dream Center in Bethel Island, and I get to give back to people, and it's just my passion. That's my passion. And then for the last 5 years, somehow God saw it fit to put me as a home church pastor for my church. We are Church of Contra Costa, and my wife's been on my side doing that with me, Angelica, and my boys are being raised up to know God, and I get to model. Even my son Keeney, my oldest son Keeney, who saw me in my addiction, by the time he was 9 years old, he hasn't seen me go back at all, because I really feel strongly about just stopping the relapses. The relapses are so detrimental, and there's a way to not ever relapse again. But God has blessed me with all these things in my life, and I never even thought that I would be in the position I am in now.
Yeah, and would you say it's just sticking to the 3 things you talked about that prevents you from relapsing? In other words, like, what keeps your feet firmly upon God's path? Is there motivating factors? Are there things that you're constantly reminding yourself of where it's like, I gotta make sure I don't go down this road or go down this path? Like, what is that keeps your feet firmly upon God's path?
Yeah, it's the daily connecting with God, having an intimate relationship with Him, never missing a morning. I never miss a morning. They said you do these 3 simple things, one of them being in the morning, which treats our mind, which connects us with God and prayer life, and renewing our mind with the Word of God, and asking His help that day to direct our thinking and to walk with Him hand in hand. By doing that, I remember who He is and what He's done for me, and it's just, I've never faltered in this because I just don't want to go back, and there's these simple things I have to do, and that being the most important one, I think, is never missing morning time with God. Lamentations 3:23 says, great is His faithfulness, His mercies begin afresh every morning.
Yeah.
And there's so many other ones. Right? And then the body piece of Scripture is Hebrews 10:25, and let us not neglect our meeting together. So I bring my physical body 4 times a week around like-minded people, no excuses, right? And then
The best way to treat my spirit, because those ways treat my spirit as well, is Matthew 10:8, give as freely as you have received. So I work with people who are still struggling. I don't take what God's given me and just take it to build my life and my kingdom.
Yeah.
Those three things are all a person has to do to never relapse again and stay walking with God. It's just, I was blown away when I heard this, because I've been trying to get well for a long time.
Yeah.
I never heard this before I went to Texas.
Yeah. No, Matt, that's our time for today. But I'll tell you what, I believe that there's people listening that you just touched their lives with your story. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's such a pleasure speaking with you and connecting with you. And we're going to be praying and believing in you every step of the way.
Thank you for joining us for We Love San Diego with Ryan McFadden. We pray that this message has blessed your life. If you'd like to learn more about We Love San Diego or to partner with us, visit welovesandiego.org, spelled WELUV sandiego.org. That's WELUV sandiego.org. For additional messages, find us on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts at We Love San Diego. Also, if you live in the San Diego area, you can find out where and when the next outreach event is by following We Love San Diego on Facebook and Instagram. We so value you listening to our show today and hope you tune in next Sunday at 9 a.m. as we bring another message of hope to you and your family. And as Brian always says, find a need and fill it. Find a hurt and heal it. This has been We Love San Diego.
There's jewelry, and then there's jewelry by Isabella Rose Design Company. Isabella Rose Design Company makes handmade jewelry for a cause. All their sales go towards fighting human trafficking. Using polymer clay and precious metals, their modern jewelry designs have helped them become one of the fastest growing jewelry companies in the world. Feel good and look good knowing that you're making a difference in the area of human trafficking. Visit them today at IsabellaRoseDesign.co. That's IsabellaRoseDesign.co.
When the COVID-19 pandemic struck, We Love San Diego sprung into action, giving out over 30,000 pounds of food and supplies, as well as over 50,000 diapers to those in need. Today, the outreach continues as they give out over 60,000 pounds of food and supplies to over 10,000 families who otherwise wouldn't know where their next meal was coming from. Visit welovesandiego.org to help out and become the hands and feet of Jesus. That's welovesandiego.org.